Wait, what? I'm doing the intro? I'm Jeremy Floyd, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Brian Foster and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call Toronto Thrillers. Oh, Canada. America's Hat. A chilly place full of warm, delightful people who all end sentences with A. At least that's usually how Americans perceive their neighbors to the north. But today, we're taking a different look at the Canadian metropolis, Toronto. A city best known as New York's stunt double. Today it gets to take center stage as we examine three movies set in the deep, dark alleyways of the seedier parts of Toronto the Good. There's a sniper on the loose, murdering sex workers and photographing the kills like a big game hunter. Hot on the killer's trail is Sergeant Boyd, a rogue cop with a heart of gold. He's tearing the city apart, rampaging through pimps, dealers, hustlers, junkies, fighters, and creepy college kids, all while trying to stop the Sin Sniper. Richard Crenna, Paul Williams, and Linda Sorensen star in George Mendeluk's 1979 thriller, Stone Cold Dead. Bev and Elliot are just your average identical twin gynecologists specializing in fertility. They're as inseparable as they are indistinguishable. The twins are the hottest stars in medicine. That is, until an actress comes between them. What could possibly go horribly wrong if they start living independent lives? Jeremy Irons, and Geneviève Buchholz star in David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers from 1988. A lonely tax auditor spends nearly all his free time at a high-concept, extremely lavish strip club, where he gets private dances from his favorite dancer. But after he gets 86'd and permanently banned from the club, how far is he willing to go to get back in? And what happens to anyone who gets in his way? And what's so special about a schoolgirl, gentlemen? Bruce Greenwood, Elias Koteas, and future Academy Award winner Sarah Polley find out in Adam Agoyan's Exotica from 1994. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
I've been really looking forward to this.
Well, Claire Neveu, this is my brother Elliot. Hi, Claire. I hope Bev's told you what a big fan I am of your movies.
No, he hasn't. As a matter of fact, he hasn't mentioned you at all.
Really?
So the question is, now that you're here, who's asking you to stay?
Exotica wasn't the thriller that I thought we were going to get, but I did like all three of the movies.
Yeah, that goddamn Harvey Weinstein trailer.
I know. I watched the trailer and it was like, no, that's not how you market a movie, but like that's what they did all the time.
Yeah.
Hello, little girl. Would you like a ride in my shiny silver car?
Are you kidding? Fuck off, you freaks. I'm telling my father you talk dirty.
You're not feeding her pills, are you? Listen, baby brother. This is unknown territory we're moving into.
You're not dealing with your average killer. He's not motivated by jealousy, money, or even sex.
What is it then?
Revenge.
There's someone that I want to kill now. He took something very special from me.
No, I'm not gonna help you kill somebody.
Not even to save a few years in prison.
Welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me as always is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Real quick, do you mind if I make a phone call? I need to feed my fish.
Good one. Finally, I knew which one you were talking about right away. Yeah. I feel like I'm on your page.
That's
now.
a rare one. Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at the sinister side of our friends to the north with three Toronto thrillers. And with us today is a very special guest to talk about these thrillers. Jeremy, if you could please do the introduction.
Yeah, so we're talking about the land of ketchup chips and Molson Ice and everything nice. And, since we're going here, we needed to have a tour guide, someone who knew the landscape. And so we had to bring on Toronto cinephile extraordinaire, Jesse Hawken.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on
Welcome.
your show.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have the perspective directly from the city that we're discussing in these films.
Yeah.
Plus, it was very much a character in these films, and we would definitely want to hear from you if that's a good representation or close or whatever that would be. Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about all things Canadian. Hit me with your best shots, John.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I noticed your about didn't quite have the same Canadian resonance just a second ago.
No, because Americans exaggerate the about.
Okay. Well, I used to work with somebody from Regina, and she would always hit it real hard.
There are parts of Canada where people talk like that.
Okay.
They'll say a boot, but it's very subtle. It's not a boot.
Yeah,
which is what a lot of Americans think.
Yeah,
Whenever
exactly.
Americans make fun of Canadians, they say a boot, but it's more like a boot.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about. It would be like a Canadian guy voice.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what's great about today's little block here, it's pretty much as far away as you can get from the SCTV.
Yeah, as far away as you can get.
Canadians,
Yeah.
and sort of the impression of Canada that at least we down here in America.
We're not talking strange brew. We are talking a different kind of strange brew, I'd say. We're talking. We haven't named the films yet, so we should do that.
Go for it.
Stone Cold Dead from 1979, Dead Ringers from 1988. I'm raising my arm in exuberance for Dead Ringers, and 1994's Exotica. Wow, this was quite a look at Toronto. I'd love for you to start if you don't mind, or if you have anything you'd like to start us off with, Jesse.
Well, I mean, we're going to be talking about these three movies that are very interesting as a Torontonian to watch, to see Toronto in cinema, but Toronto in various ways. Like Stone Cold Dead is set in New York City, but for a Torontonian watching this movie, especially one who grew up in the 70s as a kid, it is a Toronto movie. Like, it really feels... Toronto used to have a sort of Times Square-ish strip called Yonge Street.
Right.
And Stone Cold
heavily
Dead
featured in this one.
So much of the exterior work in this movie is concentrated on this 3 or 4 block stretch of Yonge Street that I know inside and out. From about Gerrard Street to about where the end of the Eaton Center, like around Shooter Street. So it goes past Dundas. Yonge and Dundas is kind of like our Broadway, sort of like that's where all our big ads for, fashion ads on big screens. Like, it's very Blade Runner like now.
Sure, yeah.
Is that where they were going in Exotica to watch all the high art in the theater?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that later. Exotica also takes place in Toronto. It doesn't really spell it out. But for a Toronto audience, it's very clearly in Toronto. And also, there are parts in Exotica where he goes to neighborhoods that don't often get filmed in Toronto. Like up around Eglinton Avenue, I think, like in the east end of Toronto, there's sort of a strip mall that we see in Exotica, and that is more of a far-flung location. Most stuff that gets filmed in Toronto is all right downtown. And
it's like Toronto. Usually, in at least in American cinema, like Toronto is the tax credit version of New York City, right? And then Vancouver is everywhere else America tax credit style.
And then Montreal is when the movie is set in Europe.
Right. Yeah.
And then the third film, Dead Ringers, is actually set in Toronto, and it taking place in Toronto is fairly important. So it's interesting to watch the various ways that Toronto is played in movies. Sometimes it gets to be Toronto, sometimes it gets to be sort of like Toronto, but they never say it, and sometimes it's supposed to be New York City.
So wait, in Stone Cold Dead, they didn't say that they were in Toronto, or was it just assumed because they mentioned Montreal or coming down from Montreal? Wasn't there a...
There's like a Quebecois sex worker in the movie, and so she mentions Montreal.
And that wrestler, I think, is Quebecois as well, right?
He's an Ontarian, I think. George Chuvalo, the great boxer.
Okay, but he had kind of a French accent.
You got any kids? Me?
No. How about you?
Man, I got no kids. I just got a wife and 3 orangutans.
Well, he's more like a sort of like hoser who's also taken too many shots to the head accent.
I see. It's a punch-drunk hoser. Yeah.
What? Look, man, he can't fight. He can't box, he can't move, he can't punch, he can't do anything. The only thing that Lammy can do is kiss the canvas. Meet him in the ring. Or did you want to meet him socially?
while I was watching Stone Cold Dead, I was wondering whether it was set in Toronto because there was something so Toronto-like about it.
Yeah.
But then you
Yeah.
started seeing yellow cabs, and I think at one point they mentioned something about New York. And there are also a couple of insert shots in some of the street life scenes in Toronto that are Times Square. So the movie is sort of doesn't hit it too hard that it takes place in New York. But as a Torontonian with some nostalgia for how cool Toronto once was, because Toronto is kind of horrible now. It was really fun to see, you know, like it's very cool that Stone Cold Dead is this tawdry sort of Canadian tax shelter exploitation movie, but you can watch it as a representation of what Toronto used to look like. Right. And there are all these cool shots. I could see a younger audience seeing this and going, wow, Toronto used to be actually really cool.
It felt like anything that I've seen with movies, especially like Scorsese films when he shows New York in the 70s. That's how it felt like. This felt exactly the same way. And I actually got confused. And I'm like, oh, this is a Toronto block, so they're in Toronto. But I kept telling myself they're in New York. But that's interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah, but I was watching it going, wow, Toronto is such a great location for sort of a sleazy 70s thriller. And there is also a great one, which I'm going to probably do for my own show, The Silent Partner, which is a first-rate crime thriller written by Curtis Hanson, set in Toronto, and Elliot Gould is supposed to be a Torontonian in the movie. So
probably more convincing than Jeremy Irons as a Torontonian as well.
Yes and no. I'll push back a little bit on that because there are so many wasps in Toronto. I'll get into it.
Okay. Well, yeah. So that was actually, I think, when I reached out to you originally, we were talking about maybe doing The Silent Partner. I love that as a Toronto thriller. And then you suggested Stone Cold Dead. I'd never heard of it. I was like, oh, Stone Cold. Yeah, I've seen that. It's
Brian Bosworth.
Brian Bosworth and Lance Henriksen. I've seen that one.
Man, yeah.
But I've never seen Stone Cold Dead. Never even heard of Stone Cold Dead. And was pretty excited to get into that one. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting place to start. So Stone Cold Dead, there was an establishing shot during the sort of opening credits montage that shows New York Harbor, but I just it was really dark. It was a very low light adverse film stock from the 70s, and it wasn't really clear that was supposed to be New York. I thought they were setting up Toronto like one would set up New York.
Yeah,
because also an East Coast city bordering the Atlantic Ocean there. Mm-hmm. I guess and I don't even know what the skyline would have been like in 1978 or whenever this was filmed. I went to Toronto once when I was maybe 9 years old, and
you don't remember
a whole lot. CN Tower, okay. I feel like didn't they have a scene up there in Stone Cold Dead because there was the rotating restaurant.
There is. Well, they sort of cheated a little bit because they show we have a hotel called the Harbor Castle, downtown Toronto, and there's a rotating restaurant there, and they show the exterior of that, but the scene where they're actually in the restaurant together is up at the CN Tower. There used to be, it might still be around, a restaurant on that level of the CN Tower. It's got two pods, and the big pod used to have an outdoor observation deck, which they usually lock off now, and a really nice indoor observation deck, but then they also had this revolving restaurant. The cool thing about the revolving restaurant is that the other half of the restaurant was a disco.
Oh.
And it was
awesome.
in the 70s. There was a disco there called the Top of Toronto, and if I could go back in time, it would be incredible to go clubbing at the CN Tower and a disco in the late 70s.
Absolutely.
So if you rub a magic lamp, that's one of your three wishes.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I was digging about Stone Cold Dead was there was this weird, tawdry, sort of cosmopolitan feeling to Toronto in the mid to late 70s. Like, it wasn't quite right, but they were trying to let their hair down and be cool. And all the scenes in like wood paneled bars and stuff in Toronto, I am happy to report that that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
Like the bars in Stone Cold Dead look like bars I would want to go and have a drink in.
Absolutely.
With the sort of Canadian hoser guy behind the bar, like that was who was probably the real bartender and the location that they filmed at. That's authentic 70s Toronto. Yeah. Like, if you were to go grab some old Toronto Life magazines from the mid to late 70s, all the ads and all the sort of pictorials in there would be like, what the cool hip Toronto. And Toronto had the new film festival at the time in Yorkville, and that was the neighborhood where all the sort of stars would be. And Toronto was really obsessed during this period of being a film powerhouse. And Stone Cold Dead was made because of the tax shelter system that was going on. I won't bore you with, I'm Canadian, so I'll start boring you very quickly with how things work here.
Keep going, yeah.
But
please,
in the mid-70s, they had this program the federal government did. I'll be saying words like the federal government too, because I'm Canadian. They wanted to boost film production in the country. In 1974, there were only 3 Canadian movies made that entire year.
Oh, wow.
Since Canadian movies didn't really have very much appeal within Canada, you're more likely to have your movie shown on television in Canada, but like to put it in a movie theater, nobody's going to come see it. So the Canadian Film Development Corporation, which is now known as Telefilm Canada, basically operated as a bank, and they wanted to change the way that film was made here as more of a commercial venture for export and not for art films and not for like awards and stuff.
Just to make money.
But the triumph of somebody like Adam Egoyan was the pendulum swinging the other way, and Canadians starting to make movies that would like be seen internationally in art house environments at film festivals. But in the mid to late 70s, Canada mostly concentrated on making these movies, and the incentive, the tax incentive, was that investors could deduct 100% of their investments in Canadian films from their taxable income. So basically it created this boom of let's just make movies. I'll pay for this movie. I get to hang out with movie stars. I get a 100% break on my investments. And all these doctors and lawyers started like investing in movies. But the thing was, it was a sausage factory. They were pumping this stuff out.
Right.
They had sort of second-rate movie stars, people who didn't really have huge careers in Hollywood, like Richard Crenna, for instance, would be like a hot property in Toronto, in the Canadian tax shelter. They'd be like, we got to get Lee Majors from the $6 Million Man. He made like 3 movies. William Shatner made several tax shelter movies. As long as there was a famous person in the cast,
right?
But that 75% of the crew and the production people, like the producers, all had to be Canadian.
Yeah.
Then it would get the tax benefit. A lot of these movies were not seen or were barely seen. Stone Cold Dead is a great example of the kind of movie that sort of got seen kind of at the time, has been forgotten about, but that the Blu-ray that they put out recently is like as good as the movies ever. Probably didn't even look that good when it was released.
I was about to say, it's probably looking even better now,
Yeah. So, but they're very derivative. Like you can see watching Stone Cold Dead how many movies that it's trying to be like.
Yeah, Dirty Harry and
very Dirty Harry. Yeah,
very Dirty Harry.
What was it? Peeping Tom.
Lots of Peeping Tom, and sort of a crime procedural, but done with some panache. I think. I thought that Stone Cold Dead was sort of heading into giallo territory.
I was going to say Italian. Yeah, I felt like it had
especially with that opening montage,
and then a lot of the shaky handheld, and you had very POV of the killer, and and then the reveal, especially, that was very much a Argento reveal, or great call.
Just briefly to describe Stone Cold Dead, it's this police procedural about a sort of a homicidal maniac who dresses kind of like the Riddler in The Batman. I thought.
The Sin Sniper.
Known as the Sin Sniper.
Which also, by the way, so this is the detail about this sniper is something that also made me feel like, okay, this is supposed to be taking place in Canada, right? It's like the insane sniper rifle that was there also looked very homemade. And it's like, in the U.S., you can just get sniper rifle anywhere. It doesn't matter. But maybe not so much in Canada.
That's true.
You had to make your own.
To attach a Canon camera to it as well.
One big difference between being a Canadian, or at least being a Torontonian, and being an American is if I'm mad at somebody in Toronto, I can't walk down the street and buy a gun. like you guys can.
Yeah, or you can't buy it at a mall or
yeah. So
Walmart.
Yeah. So that's true. That's kind of an American detail. I mean, we've got our gun problems in Toronto too, but I think Toronto, for instance, has something like 50 murders a year. A city like Detroit probably has 400.
Yeah.
But I digress. The killer in Stone Cold Dead is sort of like punishing women, especially sex workers. And
Jack the Ripper-esque.
This killer's going up on rooftops, and they've got a high-powered sort of sniper rifle that's mounted to a camera. And so the murderer is taking photos of his prey.
Just before and just after.
And then leaving the diabolical clues. And Richard Crenna is the cop who is investigating this murder. And they gave him a lot of little colorful character moments, I noticed. Like,
right.
You alluded to it with the fish joke.
I gotta call my fish.
What?
Yeah, I know maybe this sounds strange, but you see, I got this mechanism hooked up, and when I dial 922-4243, it activates this little gadget, and my fish get fed. I'm not home much.
What happens if somebody else dials the number?
It's unlisted.
You got an unlisted number for your... Oh my God. You're really crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had a Rube Goldberg machine to feed his fish based on, calling with a rotary phone back to his house, and it's very Doc Brown, homemade machine to feed his fish.
That's great.
So the cop is determined to catch this person walking around, and he gets mixed up with this woman who knew one of the women that was killed, who was played by a great Canadian actress named Linda Sorensen. And she's the woman who we find out later is sort of like a high-class escort or something, and she's friends
or like
with
a madam, right?
More of the owner, right? Or the person that runs the business.
The female pimp? I'm not sure.
Right, yeah.
That's more to the point. She seemed to also... I thought she was also taking clients too, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she was also dipping into the money.
Double dipping, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly.
So Crenna gets involved with her, and one of the other subplots in the movie is that there's a sleazy pimp in town who's also connected to these diabolical crimes, and in fact he's like one of their suspects, and he's played by Paul Williams.
What a career this guy had, right?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
The very first shot I saw of him I was like, oh, is that Josh Gad in a wig?
Who was going to play the Riddler? Oh, that's interesting.
And
that's interesting.
Paul Williams, of course, from The Phantom of the Paradise a couple of years earlier. This is one of his bigger roles. Like
I was going to mention that I've never seen that movie. That's always been one I've wanted to see. I think that this is more of a side note for our podcast that we must see it. Yeah. We got to do like a rock opera episode, I guess, right, for that, something like that.
Yeah.
But what a songwriter, right? This Paul Williams he wrote songs up till now. He wrote songs for Random Access Memories, for Daft Punk. This guy has an amazing career that's like spanning 20 years.
The year after he made Stone Cold Dead, he wrote the music for the Muppet movie.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
With a nomination, I believe, for that, too.
For Rainbow Connection, yeah. So wow. A bit of a pedigree, and it was sort of interesting that they got this guy to come to Toronto to play an evil pimp who has some minorly sympathetic moments. And there's also that very strange scene where he's making out with the girl in the car.
Yeah.
But those scenes are totally Toronto. Like he kicks her out of the limo, and it's like looks like Yonge Street around, Shepherd or something like that, suburban Toronto.
The awful, gray slush, and she's got stilettos on and having to walk through that. Yeah.
Take the Groundhog Day step in one of those big puddles and just freeze your ankle on. Yeah, man.
Yeah, and of course, because it was filmed in Toronto, while they were making this movie, it snowed, so they had to like work in a scene where Richard Crenna's in the car, and it's like, well, it looks like it's snowing again today.
Yeah. No, but you were talking about subplots, and man, did this movie have a lot of them.
Too many.
It's like there was all of a sudden we were looking at some country music audition. It's filmed like the last waltz in a tiny little bar.
Yeah.
And the Sin Sniper took like maybe a 20, 30-minute break from the movie. It was like all of a sudden we forgot that was what we were doing.
That all of a sudden became a subplot.
It was like, let's see what this undercover cop's doing. Let's see, see what the heroin scene is like.
And we needed to see the 3 milliseconds of Michael Ironside getting shot in the car at one point. It's like, was that Michael Ironside?
It was.
Underutilized, I'd say.
He made the credits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he did good.
He's barely in the movie. One thing about Canadian tax shelter era movies is that every single everybody gets in the credits. Like they would probably credit the extras.
Without that role, he probably wouldn't have gotten Scanners, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's got him that part.
Yeah. Another noteworthy name in the cast for Canadians is this actress named Jennifer Dale. This was her first movie, and she and her sister Cynthia Dale were big-name actresses in Canada in the 80s. Cynthia Dale married Peter Mansbridge, who was like the anchor of the Canadian... He's the Walter Cronkite of... or he more like the Tom Brokaw of Canada.
Got it.
Okay.
So they were like a CBC power couple. She was on Street Legal, which was a very popular sort of ripoff of LA Law. It might have come first, though. But once LA Law was popular, Street Legal just turned into LA Law.
Yeah.
But anyway, and Jennifer Dale was kind of a babe. She wound up marrying Robert Lantos, who was a big film producer, who, by the way, produced Exotica, which we'll be talking about as well.
Interesting. Great connection.
But she got a lot of parts because she was willing to do nudity, but it was funny to see Jennifer Dale was even mixed up in this movie because she's had a very long career, but she was in a lot of Canadian tax shelter movies. She was in a really strange one that I'd love more people to know about, a Canadian tax shelter movie called Your Ticket Is No Longer Valid, starring Richard.
What a title!
Starring Richard Harris as an impotent businessman who has fantasies of his sexy wife, played by Jennifer Dale, having sex with this sexy man, and it's such a strange movie. It ends with Richard Harris, and Jean Moreau shows up in it. It's so bizarre. It's not sexy. That's the thing.
No. None of that actually sounded sexy.
But the movies that Robert Lantos, the producer, made were really, really sleazy films. Like he's made many great movies that are Canadian, but he also he cut his teeth in the sort of the exploitation era, and he had a track record for success. His movies were pretty higher budget affairs and stuff. He produced Crimes of the Future this year. He's had a long relationship with Cronenberg.
I was going to ask you guys when we got to Dead Ringers if you've seen that yet. Crimes of the Future, have you?
Yes, it's excellent.
Oh, really? Great.
Yeah, it's late style Cronenberg, but it is very much of a piece with his career-long preoccupations.
That's cool.
Okay.
They marketed it at about as well as they could have because it has such limited appeal.
Because it's Cronenberg? Yeah.
Well, it's just it's arty. It's super arty,
Yeah.
and it's not a horror movie. There's some body horror stuff in it. It's a little more graphic than Dead Ringers, in fact, which is more like full of dread. There's not a lot of gore in it.
I was about to say that Dead Ringers, like it was Cronenberg restrained. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think that it made it so much more impactful when you actually got the shot of the body horror, especially the Siamese twin dream that he woke up from, and
right.
They were gonna bite the fleshy connector between the two. Like that was very Cronenberg, but
yeah.
It didn't happen as much as it did in like The Fly or Videodrome or anything like that. Yeah.
So I want to say a couple more things about Stone Cold Dead. The guy who made it is this guy named George Mendeluk, who is a veteran television director.
Yeah, it looks like he had quite a television career.
Huge stuff. And there was a really bad Canadian cop show called Night Heat. That was like
in the heat of the night,
the sort of square Canadian version of Miami Vice, I guess. It was more of they were more like straightforward buddy cop guys, but it was called Night Heat, and George Chavallo would show up on that, and it had a saxophone solo opening credits.
Nice.
In the days before the internet, when you looked to things like television to find out what you needed to know, CBC and CTV would always make these very Canadian versions of popular American genres. And Night Heat was the Canadian one with Jeff Wincott, the brother of Michael Wincott, and as these cops. And Mendeluk was in charge of Night Heat, and he directed episodes of Miami Vice as well.
Wow.
And I think that he brings a lot to Stone Cold Dead. Like it's sort of above average in terms of the way the story is told. Like there is some sort of TV movie kind of stuff, like that scene where Richard Crenna's buddy his partner turns out to be a dirty cop, and like that scene is very TV movie-ish.
Yeah, very much so.
When he confronts him.
When he brings the recording and plays the recording for him. Yeah.
Mendeluk also directed another great Canadian tax shelter movie that's garbage, but very, very fun to watch, called The Kidnapping of the President, with William Shatner and Hal Holbrook.
Oh, wow.
Somewhere on YouTube, I found a commercial for it on television in Thailand.
Oh,
and they made it. It was
awesome.
Like the 8 p.m. movie on a Thailand TV channel, and the trailer they had for it made it look like the best movie you've ever seen. Like it was so amazing. I'm going to probably do an episode on it. It stars William Shatner and Hal Holbrook in it. The president is visiting Toronto, and he gets kidnapped at City Hall by Arab terrorists.
It sounded like George Mendeluk used like a lot of authentic people for those scenes, so I think that kind of like lended itself really to the tone of this film feeling a little bit more gritty and almost documentary-like.
Yeah.
Aside from even just the camera work and things, but I think people in frame were real prostitutes and real people that were part of that city life. Life.
Well, yeah, the bartender at the bar where Jennifer Dale is dancing he has to be a real Yonge Street guy, you know. And this is the thing. Like, this is what I loved about this movie, is that it really does capture how sleazy Toronto was in the late 70s. Like, Yonge Street is incredibly boring now. It's a lot of chain restaurants and you know. It sucks now. There's a Chipotle. There's a Chipotle now.
I was going to say Chipotle.
You remember where there's a scene where one of the women is standing in front of a movie marquee, and you see all these posters for stuff like The Outlaw Josie Wales and Lipstick and all these movies from 1977. Toronto used to have Grindhouse theaters like that.
I was going to say it looked like the Grindhouses, yeah.
Yeah, and I used to go regularly to one of those Grindhouses. There was a theater called the Rio. A show called Grindhouse Institute inviting me to talk about a Grindhouse movie.
Thank you.
It's like, let me tell you a little something about Toronto. Toronto used to, on Yonge Street, there were at least 4 Grindhouse movie theaters. There was the Coronet, the Rio, the Biltmore, which was the one where the woman was standing in front of the posters for Lipstick. And then there was a porn theater called the Cinema 2000.
Wow. And, Cinema 2000.
Which one do you think it was? So in one of the early scenes where we meet Richard Crenna, we see a marquee behind him.
That's the Rio.
And it was a big yellow marquee.
Yeah.
And like on gigantic lettering, it was Enter the Dragon.
Yep.
And then after that, it was followed by Teenage Tramp or some other skin flick. And there's a
sounds like a Grindhouse, right? Yeah. What a block. We need to do. We'll do that for our next block. Enter the Dragon and 2 porns from the 70s.
Travis Bickle takes his date out there.
That was how they
plenty
programmed
of couples come here. What do you want?
They did. That's the thing. On Friday nights, if you went to the Rio, there were couples there and stuff.
Yeah.
The Rio opened at 9 a.m. until 4 a.m, and they just showed movies 4 in a row all day and all night. And you could just go in there and pay $5 or $3 or something, and sleep there if you wanted to. Like people would go there to hide and stuff like that. You know, I went to see Disorderlies with the Fat Boys.
Yeah, totally.
At the Rio. I saw that at the Rio.
What a great Grindhouse picture.
I saw 52 Pickup by John Frankenheimer at the Rio.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, so cool. I've done my time, and one time we stayed for the porn too. We watched a movie called Small Town Girls, which had the funniest opening title theme ever. I was drunk also, but we were all laughing away at the incredible lyrics for this song. I wish I could find it. If I put it up on Twitter, I'd get suspended.
Yeah.
Get their prize, small town girls, to have a chance, they'll have to spread their thighs. Every girl's fantasy is to feel a dream inside, and the dreams are coming coming true. They're coming now.
But the Rio, anytime a movie films in front of the Rio, you know that you're dealing with something. But the Yonge Street of my childhood and my teenage years is in Stone Cold Dead. All these places that I thought I would never see again, like the Steak and Burger restaurant we see out the window. And
really, that was a staple, huh?
Yeah, that was like a steakhouse chain. And there was a scene where this woman walks into a place called the Pinball Spot, and there was that great shot of her walking down the stairs with this big neon red arrows pointing down. That was like iconic Toronto Yonge Street imagery. Like in my teenage years, if you went down those stairs, there was tons of pinball machines and video games. It was like there were several arcades on Yonge Street, and that's where all the good record stores were, like Sam the Record Man, which you see in the film. It's you see these big spinning neon white lights. That's the front of Sam the Record Man. And a record store called A&A Records and Tapes. There was the Vinyl Museum. And I loved buying records when I was a teenager. So I went to Yonge Street to go to arcades and buy records.
Wow.
And I loved seeing it again.
You guys need the Canadian Paul Thomas Anderson to make a movie about that.
Yeah, it was. I don't know, poutine pizza or something. I don't know what movie to call it.
There you go. There you go.
All dressed chips. That's the other. Ketchup chips is a thing that mystifies Americans. Do you guys know about all dressed chips?
Yes, but that's because my wife is a connoisseur of all kinds of different junk food.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a British thing, though, right? All dressed?
It's a Quebec thing.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think it spread around the world, but in Quebec, they invented what they had basically 4 flavors of potato chips: barbecue, ketchup, salt and vinegar, and sour cream and onion.
Yeah.
And all dressed chips is all 4 of those flavors together. That's how it started.
It's doing the suicide soda fountain.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a suicide.
It would be like, factories figuring out what to do with the leftover shit from production.
Right,
it's like, all this powder's together.
We got all
Actually,
this
tastes
powder
pretty good.
left over.
Let's just
we
throw
got
it all over the
powder
chips.
per bag here. Yeah.
I
Put
think
it all
they've
together.
So that's the origins of all dressed chips. But I think Americans are starting to realize that that's a really good flavor of potato chip.
Oh, totally.
I mean, speaking of delicious potato chips, should we move on to to Dead Ringers?
What a segue.
Yes.
Well, one thing I wanted to say while we're still finishing up Stone Cold Dead, Stone Cold Dead was a replacement for the Silent Partner that was sort of originally pitched here, but we still got in Stone Cold Dead some of the elements of a Silent Partner, which is an American lead, as we already talked about, fish tanks, as we already talked about, and very briefly we saw a Christmas tree, which Silent Partner is also a Christmas movie, or
a low-key Christmas movie.
Yeah, a low-key Christmas movie, exactly.
Yeah, only the first act takes place at Christmas, but yes,
it's very
indeed.
prominent, let's say.
Oh yeah.
And and then the other thing, which I think kind of will move us right along into Dead Ringers, is that like this movie, we talked about that sort of very brackish feel that the movie had. Is it in Toronto? Is it New York? Obviously it was filmed in Toronto, but where's the movie supposed to be set? It's not super clear. Although, at one point we see an American flag maybe in the chief's office, and
you see yellow cabs, New York cabs.
Okay, and I feel like we see green dollar bills, which at least according to Exotica, you guys don't have up there with your loonies and toonies and whatnot.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was like the sort of melange of accents that we got in this. So we got several, sort of like, I don't know what, middle of the road American accents, some Quebecois, like we were talking about. And then at one point, there was that, she was introduced as a streetwalker, but it maybe turns out she was an undercover cop.
Yeah.
And, she had the like mighty Aphrodite accent. It was just like, I don't know where that was supposed to come from, but I guess, maybe Mira Sorvino was paying attention.
That was Belinda J. Montgomery, who made a lot of tax shelter movies. She did one called Blackout with Jim Mitchum.
Okay. Wow.
Which is sort of an above-average tax shelter movie. We don't have to spoil it on the show, but the ending of Stone Cold Dead was a surprise, I thought.
I agree.
The reveal of the killer was something you realize was coming down Fifth Avenue when it gets revealed.
Yeah.
But there was some good misdirection in the movie. We're led to believe that Linda Sorensen's daughter's boyfriend just screams suspect.
Yeah, because he's like the red herring throughout the whole thing, right? Just the weirdo that's
sort of an incel.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah,
exactly. But it was good. It was a fun reveal at the end. I thought it kind of came out of nowhere, like that there wasn't much of a hint at it, but it was fine. It was great.
Mm-hmm. What's great is so the way you were planning on watching it was some third generation VHS rip on YouTube, and perhaps for a movie like this, it's appropriate. Mm-hmm. But I'm so glad you got to see the new Blu-ray of that. And get to see all your old locations.
I'm assuming that's the transfer that's on Amazon too. It's on Amazon Prime right now. For some reason,
and it's so great that a movie this tawdry and forgotten got such a nice transfer.
They
it
put a lot of care into this.
And I appreciated it just for getting to see 70s Toronto captured so lovingly.
Right.
All these places that I'd forgotten existed. It was nice to see them again.
I thought it was great.
Totally. Well, I think, speaking of oddball accents in Toronto, how about Jeremy Irons' South London accent?
Jeremy Irons squared. Yeah.
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 What a movie, right? Holy cow. Was this...
Dead Ringers?
Yes, this is... I know I saw part of this as a kid. I didn't get it. Now it's like, holy cow, this is an amazing movie.
There are those that claim they can't ever tell the difference between them.
You mean to say there's two of them?
Don't be nasty. Of course there are two of them. They're twins, dear. My dear, you've gone absolutely pale. Have I said something?
No, not at all. Where's that waiter? I want some coffee.
Yeah, out of the three, this is the only one I had seen. I saw it in high school. I thought Jeremy Irons was, brilliant. And the movie was really interesting, but I don't know. It wasn't connecting with me. Now I kind of get it, but I do get this idea. I do get this feeling that Cronenberg often gives me, which is, that was really interesting. I don't want to watch that again.
That unease that he creates, right? It's a little too strong almost.
Totally. Well, and especially with that really ominous music, particularly in the third act of this one.
Howard Shore, right?
Yeah. What a connection to Stone Cold Dead with some of the the heroin usage and even some of the sex workers.
Tons of drugs in Dead Ringers. They took a melange of drugs during this. This was kind of like a Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But unfortunately, this didn't end up in Vegas. They just ended up going down a pit of darkness, and it got worse and worse as the film went on. Similar to The Fly in many ways, but more of a mental breakdown as opposed to the entire physical deformation of the characters.
Dead Ringers was sort of the beginning of where Cronenberg started to sort of up the ante of being taken seriously as an artistic filmmaker. Like he'd had some commercial hits. He'd had a lot of exploitation. Shivers and Rabbit.
Sure.
He's probably the most substantial name to come out of the tax shelter era. He's dismissed the movies that were made during that time, but that opportunity of movies being easily financed and profitable, and Cronenberg knew that the impulse was to try to make movies that would appeal to a commercial export audience. So he made things like Shivers and Rabid to be seen internationally. Stuff like Rabid would get released in Italy. One of the reasons why they put Marilyn Chambers as the lead in Rabid was because they figured that it would be a big sell around the world to have a porn star in the lead, even if it wasn't a porno.
Yeah.
So there were all these calculations to be successful and also to raise controversy because these movies were financed with public money. People were very upset when Shivers came out and said, your taxpayer dollars paid for this disgusting film, this is the work of a very diseased man and stuff like that. And he had a bad experience when he did Videodrome. Like, he had some interference with the studio. He had wonderful experiences working on The Fly, which was produced by Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks, yeah.
Right. You know, who is one of the most very, very picky in the movies that he produces, but like full creative control to the director. Wow. And Dead Ringers was taken seriously by critics. Jeremy Irons wasn't nominated for an Oscar, but he won all the critics' prizes that year for Best Actor.
He wasn't nominated for an Oscar for this?
Not even, no. And when he won a couple of years later for Reversal of Fortune, he thanked Cronenberg on stage.
Yeah.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Thanks for giving me this Oscar for the makeup Oscar.
Yeah.
I think there was a sense that it was a makeup Oscar because what's so fascinating about the performances that he gives in Dead Ringers is he's playing identical twins who have their own personalities, and one's more of an alpha, but they also have this crazy compulsion to be each other.
Right.
And so
Irons
is playing Beverly and Elliot, but he's also playing Beverly being Elliot and Elliot being Beverly.
God, and for the longest time in the movie, I was so confused as to who I was listening to talk and who's what. And finally, you start getting their cadences and their nuances, and then you can start to see they are totally different people that he's creating or performing.
But he wanted you to be confused.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah,
it's all thought out, and when you see it again, you're more aware of it.
If you watch it again, Jeremy. If you watch it again, yeah.
If you watch it
again. For the third time, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I forgot what a tough sit the last 15 or 20 minutes are because the long and the short of the plot of this movie is that these are identical twins who, from a very early age, we see at the end of the movie why we had a flashback to them as children.
Yeah.
But they are.
Yeah. So the opening was interesting. It was very. I was like, okay, like I was sitting like about 20 minutes into it. I was like, man, why was that opening there? It's like essentially just establishing like the Annie Hall idea that it's like, Jesus Christ, even Freud talked about having a latency period. And he's like, we never had one.
I believe that opening scene is there to establish that their sort of pathological ideas about women started in their childhood, and that these two personalities feed on each other, like they're very symbiotic. Right. But what hit me this time...
It's a school of fish. This is how, because of water... we have to do this different thing.
They consider women to be different species. I mean, that's one of the reasons why when they start getting delusional towards the end of the film,
right.
They have these ideas that women are mutants and stuff. Like they say some really horrible things.
What was it was like gynecological instruments for mutant women or whatever the art installation became.
That's what you go to a scanner and ask him to make you surgical instruments, and that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
The creepiest thing that claw, and they kept doing a really cool close up of that like claw thing that would just like it was on a wire and it would like rip.
Articulated, like monster,
like a finger,
metal monster finger, exactly.
A giant finger claw, but again, Cronenberg didn't go for the full gore there. He just went for like a sound effect, something off screen. You see the instrument move, and then some blood. But man, it didn't.
And then you saw everyone else in the.
Gasp
in the insane the Spanish Inquisition operating theater.
Didn't that look like a Jodorowsky film? Yeah. It was like all white, and then they had those orange or like Dune,
reddish,
or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so in Canada, that's what the surgeons.
That's
wear?
what our public health care is like.
I see.
No, no, they don't dress like cardinals. That was
it's
artistic
not as idealized
license.
as we believe it is down here in the U.S.
It's what the Republicans think our healthcare system is like.
Exactly. So he's feeding into that those delusions and paranoias.
I was thinking while I was watching that movie that the hospital's HR department is going to hear about this.
Yeah.
They definitely did.
Fascinating. They're quite beautiful. What are they? They're gynecological instruments for working on mutant women.
Mutant women? That's a great theme for a show.
And I love the woman who looked like Ferris Bueller's mom, who was like watching him shoot up in his office and was like, listen, I can't work under these conditions. I'm fucking out of here.
Jesus. After he screamed at her because she was on the phone and he couldn't get her attention, Yeah. 9 times.
It's so fun to watch the the slow slide. Like once you've seen the
oh my
movie
God,
already,
yeah.
then when you're watching the beginning of the movie and they're running this really cool clinic and everything's so orderly and they're such superstars.
Yeah.
You know, they've got high-powered clients.
But even their offices and whatever, like looked like RoboCop. You know, it's like it's like
exactly.
It's awful. You know, cold, sterile, and like.
You know what though? That's
80s
Toronto.
high art.
That's Toronto.
I see.
Their
I'm
apartment.
just tearing your city apart, huh?
No, please do. I'll join in with you on tearing the city apart. But their apartment was like total 80s Toronto, like chic residence. You know,
Cold. Yeah.
that sort of art gallery with the guy who works with steel. You know,
right.
that's
The
like
scanner?
a Toronto.
Yeah.
That's a Toronto art gallery. Yeah, the guy from
scanner,
Scanners.
Yeah.
That was a working Toronto art gallery. Cronenberg always films on location. That scene where they're doing that speech where Beverly shows up wasted and wrecks it.
Yeah.
That was filmed up at Mississauga in their city hall, which is this big lavish building. That shot of him stumbling down the stairs in that huge archway is at the Mississauga City Hall. So, you know, they went all over town looking for cold environments because Toronto is a pretty ugly city in many respects. We put a lot of energy into building shit in the 60s through the 80s that we're still dealing with now. They're starting to tear down some of the nicer 60s buildings, sadly, and 50s buildings.
Yeah.
But then there are all these sort of 80s and 90s abominations that Dead Ringers captures really nicely.
I do everything for those bimbos except take them home and stick it in.
Maybe a better way to capture, if you haven't seen this, what this thing looks like is, you know, the house in Beetlejuice after the renovations. Essentially, it's like it's
when they
that
come
horrifying,
back,
like, you know, that modern,
including
late
the sculptures.
80s art.
I think there's some of the weird sculpture type shit that's in there too. You know, like those very hard lines and everything too. I do want to talk about though the look of this film and some of the shots with the twins. And usually there are these kinds of movies. I am always taken out of it when there's a twin that's played by the same actor. There's always an eye line thing that screws with me. This movie didn't have that at all. Like, in fact, incredible. For most of this movie, I completely forgot that Jeremy Irons was one person. And whenever they were either in the scene together, which they did a great job of even having them interact in a lot of cool shots that you probably wouldn't normally have, twins interact with each other. I still thought that the performances alone sold it. But then on top of it all, just that effect was so effective that it just worked. And I was fooled the whole time.
That was state of the art. In 1988, like it still holds up. Like
absolutely,
you can tell sometimes that like they were shot separately, but you are also stunned at how in sync the performances are with each other.
Right,
and that's something that's very important thematically about the movie. Like that these two brothers are kind of in sync with one another, and where things start to go down is when one of them goes into a different sort of headspace, and the other brother decides to get in sync with that other brother because they have this pathological connection to one another.
Well, Siamese, right? I mean, they kind of get into that later, that they technically are Siamese twins, I guess more by emotion or by mental, like ESP, if you will, or something. Psychological. However, there is a bit of a separation of the two Siamese twins by the end, and like you said, that last 15 minutes is just a real rough ride.
But this time, that last 15 minutes sort of hit me hard because I remembered that we did get introduced to them as these weird little children. And by the end of the movie, they are weird little children. Like they even like they turned back into those little creepy 9-year-olds.
But I want ice cream.
And then like volunteering to like let him use his implements on him, like just deranged, but back to their deranged childhood, you know, and like the way that and the children are operating on something in the table when we fade to black in that intro as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Beverly couldn't look at Elliot laying dead in the. I'm correct, right, in saying that? Beverly made it at the end.
Beverly killed Elliot.
Killed Elliot, yeah, and he couldn't even look at his brother and didn't want to admit it to himself that wasn't a dream that he was waking up from. He, in fact, did do what he thought he did, which was remove his brother from existence,
Yeah, so depressing.
Yeah.
So effective.
That was Yeah, I had to take a day off of the movies we were watching after watching that one.
But his performance is so pinpoint accurate. Like, you're never confused who's who unless they want you to be, because that's their pathology.
Yeah, I was about to say, unless it was on purpose, for sure.
Well, by the time that they were down that hole, though, you could easily tell which one was which, and I don't think even in the movie, narratively, the board even believed who was Elliot was Beverly when he was trying to save their careers, which didn't work out very well for them.
Yeah. No, just on every level, it's so well made. Like, there was nobody on Cronenberg's level at this point in Canada. Like, we have good directors, but we didn't have, like, one of the greats working in Toronto, setting his films here, too, like, not pretending it's somewhere else. Most of Cronenberg's movies were shot in Canada, and many of them say that they're Canada.
Happy birthday, Ellie. Happy birthday, baby brother.
Well, I also think that Cronenberg toned down the violence in Dead Ringers to a certain extent to increase the likelihood that it would be recognized in awards season.
Yeah.
And just to elaborate on something I said earlier, that this was the beginning of Cronenberg starting to become a filmmaker who could get, like, award-winning performances or award-nominated performances out of his actors, or the screenplay work, like A History of Violence was nominated for screenplay. William Hurt was nominated for acting in that film. Viggo Mortensen was nominated for Eastern Promises. And I think Iron should have been nominated and probably should have won for Dead Ringers.
I'm surprised he wasn't nominated. I thought this was a for sure nomination for him.
No, it was one. I'm positive that part of the reason he won for Reversal of Fortune was the makeup award.
Well, yeah.
The reversal of the bad award season.
Yeah.
Let's bring those big hairy palms together, gentlemen. Have a nice big round of applause for Callie. Callie. Yes, indeed, Callie. And you too can have Callie come over to your table for only $5, where she could show you the mysteries of her world. Trust me, gentlemen.
Club Exotica, not as thrillery as sort of promised, but I think it is an interesting evolution here, going from 70s, 80s, 90s in this block. We have a lot of similar themes with a lot of strippers and sex workers in Stone Cold Dead to this. But as the movie sort of progressed from 70s to 80s, 90s, we get further out of the Grindhouse and more into the art house. Mm-hmm. And this is the Art House Institute now for this last one.
But this was a movie that was also trying to have it both ways. Like, it was, it was produced by Robert Lantos, who likes to keep things a little bit on the sleazy side. It's very commercial to do that.
What is it about a Catholic schoolgirl that makes you think that the DJ at the strip club should be talking this much?
Casey Jones from
Casey
Ninja Turtles.
Jones. I know. He had the same hair.
Yeah. I like him. I'm a big fan of Elias Koteas. I think he's a great actor.
Oh,
he's become an even better actor. Like,
I agree.
He's doing this sort of Brando shit in Exotica, but I loved him in stuff like Zodiac. Like, he's a wonderful actor.
I thought he was great in the Prophecy. I really liked that movie.
Yes.
He was amazing in Thin Red Line, if you saw that one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That was I was very impressed by him in that movie. And sometimes the thing about Elias Koteas, the reputation that he had in the 90s was that he was a hothead. Like,
oh, really?
He was sort of like, I'll tell a tale out of school for you in a moment. But he did this movie that I thought was really funny called Malarek, which was a movie about a hard-as-nails reporter busting a story wide open in Montreal in the 70s. It was filmed in the 90s, and the trailer used to run all the time. They were really trying to get you to watch Malarek. One of the things about the Canadian film world is that you'll get the trailer for about 4 months, and then the movie plays for 2 weeks.
Oh.
Most Canadian movies don't do well.
I see.
But Egoyan's, the thing about Exotica is that it actually did very well. Because it was the first Canadian movie to screen at Cannes in a long time. Now that's a matter of course. There's generally a Canadian movie at Cannes, but it had not been for a while when Exotica screened there. I don't think it won a prize, but it certainly became a movie that people were talking about. And when it opened in Canada, because it got launched at TIFF, it was a huge hit. Like people were rushing off to see a Canadian film, you know, which almost never happens. To the point, and got such good reviews and had such a pedigree in the festival circuit that Miramax picked it up. You know, we can put two and two together to figure out what Harvey Weinstein was interested about this movie. But
it was Sweet Chrissy and her Catholic
Chrissy,
schoolgirl.
had to be, it's my wife's name, so that was
that had to be fun to watch for you. Yeah, exactly.
It played on 500 screens in the States. It made about $5 million in North America. But the thing is, Miramax promoted it as a sexy thriller, and in fact, what it is a study of grief and psychological torment.
So, yeah. Well, I guess it kind of leads you down the path of exotic thriller, right? But then the way that it finalizes is that it's more about grief, and we find that
it feels like it's going to be the whole time.
Yeah,
it's going to turn to that, and especially when we got to the sort of ending there, where like Bruce Greenwood is, bringing that rusty old pistol. He's going to, take Elias Koteas out.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, well, this is probably where these trailers are coming from. But no, it turns out the trailers are just bullshit, and like it's not an exotic thriller at all.
No. Not the first time that Miramax did false advertising to get you interested in a movie, but it worked.
I mean, even I'm looking at the poster on Wikipedia right now, and it looks like one of those like Poison Ivy Showtime movies from back in the day, and the just the face of the young girl, and I mean, she doesn't get naked once in this movie. She does exotic dancing, right? But she never actually comes out of her schoolgirl outfit when she's in the strip
her
club,
blouse
right?
is open a couple times, but I don't know. Yeah,
I'm just thinking it's like not as sexy as the trailers could make it out to be, I guess.
The movie is tastefully done, but
I think Greenwood is great in it. He's an excellent actor, and this is a great example of how I guess his career got started, or at least I'm assuming this is an early role for him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, he and Egoyan met. I guess they became friends, and Greenwood's been in several of his films. He was very good in The Sweet Hereafter. But so this was Egoyan's sort of breakout movie. Like he had been making these sort of arty European style Canadian movies for a while on increasingly large budgets and being seen around the world, and that's something that doesn't often happen in the early 90s anyway in Canada.
Yeah. But that art house circuit turning maybe a little more commercial. I guess that's how Denis Villeneuve got started too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Ensandi and all this
with Enemy and
before that.
Well, he was more of a name in Quebec. He was working a lot making French language movies, and then he made the big jump into the English language after Ensandi was nominated for foreign language film. Like that was, I guess, his breakout movie. But he was going from strength to strength.
Yeah.
But this was sort of like peak Egoyan for me. Like Exotica is a movie that I actually thought was fine in the 90s. I liked it a lot better watching it again, partly because now I know what's going on, or I remembered the plot.
Right.
This is one of those movies where there's it's like a mosaic structure where there's a bunch of characters that are tenuously related to one another, and we don't understand why, and we don't quite understand why we're being shown flashbacks, and they start to add up. By the end of the movie, it pays off.
You know what's funny? Like speaking of Ensandi, this is like maybe it's a very Canadian structure, I guess, because that movie had a similar thing going on with like. How are these people related? Oh my gosh!
But it's tricky when you make a movie like this where you don't understand what's going on for the longest time. You're starting to piece it together. To have everything riding on it all making sense at the end is one thing, but to maintain the interest of the audience leading up to that is the problem. That's the challenge.
It's a slow burn, but it pulled me through. I was intrigued throughout the whole time, and
for sure. And
they kept gave you a little bit of little tidbits of information that would give you a little bit more background on what's actually going on, because you didn't really want to think of Bruce Greenwood, I think, as being like kind of a scumbag, right? Like you were just
well, that's what I was about to say. Like, there's a lot of like misdirection
Yeah.
happening the whole time. Where
Really well done.
He's he has this like pathological situation where he's like paying his friend's daughter to
Babysit.
fake babysit.
Yeah.
But as he's talking to her, you're like, oh geez, and he's paying her money, and you think it's you think that's supposed to be that like an underage sex worker or something,
Right.
and like
Sarah Polly, right? Probably her big breakout, right?
Mm-hmm. And a very strange relationship where his dad knows that it's like this whole thing, and you're trying to figure out all the dynamics that are going on inside of this very elaborate and bizarre strip club.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, just as someone who's never seen it until now, there's a lot of little things where it's like even though you're not sure how it all is going to connect in the end, because of the misdirection and everything, you're definitely able to be, your attention is able to be held.
But what an odd relationship that you started getting with people, right? Like, because Greenwood was a tax auditor, right? For Canadians IRS.
Revenue Canada.
Revenue Canada. That's
There you
right.
go.
I couldn't remember what it was. But then
I can.
you're introduced to the pet shop owner, and you're like, why the hell am I being introduced to a pet shop owner? But then that was his way back into Exotica through holding that over his head. Like, we know you have a $200,000 smuggling business going through this pet shop, so I'll let that go. If you can just go and ask this girl a couple questions, you're like, how obsessed with this girl is this guy? But the way that it unfolds, it's just really nice, and I don't know, kind of like comes down for a nice soft landing by the end.
Yeah,
in another flashback too.
Mm-hmm. It works. It rewards your patience too.
Yeah, I agree.
And I do want to say though that this club, Exotica, does not represent Canadian strip clubs. They do not look like this.
Boo!
It looked like the cheesy. We had this Italian restaurant called the Organ Grinder in Toronto, or the Old Spaghetti Factory. Sorry, and they had sort of like the palm trees indoors and stuff like that.
We have
the strip
Old
club
Spaghetti Factory.
Do you? Maybe I don't know.
In like Pasadena area, I think.
Oh, nice. I wonder if they're the same company.
I wonder. Yeah, that's interesting.
know.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. I was stunned that that the Old Spaghetti Factory still exists. Maybe in Toronto it does. Why would I go there?
That was the old
new,
one.
the old spaghetti.
The old two.
Yeah.
Maybe if it exists still, maybe I should go there because I don't think I've been there since I was like 12. But
actually, let's go pause. You go ahead and go there, and you can report back. We'll pick this recording up in a minute.
Through editing, you're back. Okay. How was your spaghetti?
But like you're not going to hear Leonard Cohen at a strip club in Toronto. Maybe you would now because of Exotica. But when
Right.
Exotica was a new movie, it was like, what is this strip club? It looks like a Queen Street art installation. Like it's the thing about Toronto is there was this stretch called Queen Street West where all the sort of hipsters were, like proto-hipster. Before the 2000 hipsters was like the Queen Street and the cool stretch where all the artsy types were. Don McKellar, his apartment is sort of between Bathurst and Spadina on Queen Street.
Oh wow!
Or actually, that's right. It's between Bathurst and Spadina. But that's sort of the area where Adam and Goyen would go out for drinks. That's where the hip sort of stuff was. When companies would try to introduce hip products in Canada, they would test them
go there first,
on Queen Street to see whether or not they could make something.
That's
cool.
where the sneaker releases were at.
Yeah. Yeah, when Vice magazine opened up a store in Toronto, like that just sort of cemented the neighborhood's reputation, which got even more hipsterish at the very end of the 90s. So Exotica is sort of situated on an earlier stretch of that trajectory of like the artsy Toronto. I think that Exotica, it's a movie that it's a little bit squeamish about sex. Like it has a real, that's a thing in Canada. We're a little bit uptight about that stuff.
Yeah, that's also a thing in America. I don't know if you've been here, but it's like that here too.
But we have sort of more of a, we don't do that sort of thing in Canada, sort of thing.
I see.
There's like an American movie would just have a strip club with strippers in it, and probably the producers would be,
listen. So we just watched a movie recently that kind of reminded me of. I was reminded of that while watching this, which is during the sort of Leonard Cohen Catholic schoolgirl PG-13 strip scene, that felt a lot more like a performance art piece. It reminded me a lot of the strip scene with Grace Jones in Vamp.
Vamp.
And that was shot, at least. I don't know if it was supposed to be set, but it was shot in L.A. And
interesting.
And her very 80s modern art piece where she looked like, oh god, I'm forgetting the name of that artist who did those paintings to benefit AIDS and stuff like that in the 90s.
Keith Haring.
Yeah, Keith Haring. So he had a very Keith Haring body paint on, and and like a kind of a kabuki paint on her face. And then the whole time it was this almost the same kind of music that Exotica starts with, playing while she's kind of interacting with this modern art piece chair. So anyway, Americans have it too. That's all I'm getting at.
But our strip clubs in Toronto or in Canada look just like any other country's strip clubs.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
There's no sort of a strip club trying to be that arty would go out of business very quickly in real life Toronto.
There's not enough sleaze. Well, Stone Cold Dead showed us what Toronto strip clubs look like.
Yeah.
Sometimes he has to wait for her, and sometimes she's waiting for him. She'll protect him. She's his angel.
Wait, you mentioned earlier that Toronto's not, that cool vibe anymore that we saw in the earlier films in this block. So you said it's a little bit more commercial now. So does that mean that, I'm sorry, did you say King Street was the name?
Yonge Street.
Yonge Street.
That's our main drag.
Is that not around now, or is it like completely commercialized, or how's that?
Lots of malls are along Yonge Street now. Lots of condos are going up. Lots of really nice, tawdry old buildings are being knocked down. When young Dundas Square was created, which was like a sort of an area where Dundas does a big curve, they decided to put a big semi-public, mostly private park there as a meeting place, but it's not public property. You can be kicked out for being there.
Of course.
When Toronto has sort of anti-vaxxer protests, they all show up there. It gets
and
used.
They don't get kicked out.
No, unfortunately, and the cops, of course, are on their side, so they love it.
Wow.
But all the strip clubs and billiard halls and porn theaters that were on Yonge Street, they've all been gentrified, and it's kind of like an outdoor mall now. Yeah. And some of the nicest, oldest buildings got recently knocked down and are being turned into condos. But that kind of architecture where they keep the front of the building and then put a giant skyscraper behind it.
Oh, right.
It's like, blech. Anyway, but like the death blow, a few months ago, the very area that Stone Cold Dead takes place in around Yonge and Gerrard, they just opened an IKEA.
Oh, nice! You can get the Swedish meatballs and
and really spend the whole Sunday trying to just get out of the place. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not like the warehouse like an IKEA. It's like a place where you can order things and then they'll send them to you. It's for condo life, for people who all these new condos that are going up need furniture.
Swedish gynecological instruments there.
I wish
for mutant women.
With some scanner that sells them to you?
I wish.
Give us the tools and we will do the job.
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with these instruments, Doctor.
I've just had them made. They're brand new.
So it's just bland, and so it was fun to watch these movies to see. Oh yeah, Toronto used to have all this great 80s architecture,
right? Yeah.
That I like in Exotica. The strip club takes place in a sort of an area behind Yonge Street that used to be mostly parking lots. Like, there was tons of parking lots, and the back doors of stores had sort of like neon signs back then and stuff like that. Now it's all paved over and put up with condos and stuff. So it was sad to see all these cool, seedy parts of Toronto that have been cleaned up.
That's why these movies, well, at least Stone Cold Dead, need to be seen by more people now, right? So you can capture that moment in time, that time capsule like we're talking about.
Yeah. If you need a fix to see Stone Cold Dead, it's on YouTube, but it's a VHS rip.
Yeah.
But Run Don't Walk if it's on streaming or on the Blu-ray, because it's a Canadian tax shelter movie that is underrated, I think. So strange to see Canada trying to make a giallo.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's like so satisfying. Even if it's not super gory, there's all the signifiers of giallo.
Absolutely.
And for it to all be taking place in my hometown is a big thrill.
Now make sure you got a close line.
These 22s make a small hole going in, but they sure make a big mess on the inside.
Very nice.
Unlike giallos, it also had more of that more realistic blood, I guess. So you know, even though it's very limited, the gore felt more visceral in that sense.
Mm-hmm. I thought they did a great job of that. It was, you saw the camera taking pictures, you saw it almost in still frames or you know, that staccato. The shot is taken, you don't really see the blood or the splatter, but then you see the aftermath and the police are already investigating the murder. You know, it's like that real quick cut and you see like the hole in the body of the prostitute. It was really well done, I thought, for that, without overdoing the gore. But the heroin use in this movie, I think, is probably the hardest thing to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, like the close-ups of the arms and everything, the track marks, and like, they really got into that. Now, I kind of looked it up. I'm like, was heroin, you know, really big at that time in Canada? I mean, it looks like blow or cocaine was really big in Canada at that time. Obviously, that came up through the U.S. But, I mean, I'm sure they partied all the time there, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Toronto had its drug problem. Keith Richards was busted in Toronto for doing heroin.
There you go.
He had to do community. I think he had to do a concert in Toronto to make up for it. I think they forced the Rolling Stones to do a show in Toronto to make money. Toronto's nickname used to be Toronto the Good, but you know, Stone Cold Dead proves once and for all that Toronto used to look way better.
Toronto the seedy.
Yeah.
Actually, baby, you have no idea how far it's gone. You know, I told him to touch you. I said you were into it.
Don't fucking touch me, you fucker! Don't! Just fuck off,
You had a story to tell out of school. Did we get to that one yet?
So a friend of mine worked on Exotica, and I think enough time has passed for me to reveal that Elias Koteas was supposedly having a fling with Mia Kirshner on the production. Oh. And that scene where they have a yelling match in the dressing room and like they're screaming at each other, that's real. And they kept it in the movie.
Really?
Wow.
According to a friend of mine.
Because it's a great scene.
Yeah, but that's not, that is a heightened, like maybe they were doing the scene, but they were mad at each other when they filmed that scene, and it shows.
They weren't thinking the words that they were saying, right? They were saying they had their own hidden conversation happening. Oh, that's very interesting.
Well, when they called cut, they kept arguing.
Guys, cut.
Yeah, but I guess they got permission.
That's
well, I'm positive that Egoyan got their permission, or he might have felt. I think Egoyan's a very sensitive filmmaker, so he might have felt perturbed about it. I know that he felt a little perturbed about making Exotica with his wife, the actress Arsene Kanjian, who was pregnant with their child while they were making the movie, and he said that he felt a little bit of a remorse that he sort of had her filming this movie with all these naked babes while she, was feeling the baby coming, kind of thing. Like, might have been difficult for her.
I knew she had to really be pregnant. That looked too realistic. That's not a prosthetic. That had to be the real thing.
No, that was their, and so their child is also in the movie in her belly.
Wow. There you go.
Very sweet.
Exotica is a special place. My mother was dedicated to creating a very particular type of atmosphere, and I would like to maintain that.
Jesse, it was really a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us all the insight into Toronto, and that kind of, I felt like we were walking through the city and you were showing us the sights. It was really interesting. Do you have some places that our listeners can follow you?
Well, yes. On Twitter, I'm at Jesse Hawken. that's my name on Instagram as well, in case Twitter explodes.
Yeah. What's
Any day
Twitter?
now.
Yeah. Twitter went the way of Yonge Street.
Yeah, actually, you're right. They put a Chipotle in on Twitter now. When we used to have a steak and burger. Also, I run Junk Filter, the podcast, and our Twitter handle is Junk Filter Pod, and we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/junkfilter. My patrons usually get 2 bonus shows a month. And I try to put out 4 or 5 episodes a month. So,
Yeah. And it's an excellent show
value
if you
in
haven't checked it out yet. So.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any sort of focus that you guys focus on, or is it just any movies, or how does that work?
It's pop culture and how it relates to the present day. Like if certain events that are happening in the world make me think about a movie, it's fun to sort of watch that movie with these things in mind. Mm-hmm. I recently did an episode with the writer Jacob Bacharach where we talked about Jurassic Park, which I had never seen. But believe it or not, I had never seen it. I was too snobby a film nerd at the time that I boycotted Jurassic Park. I was too busy watching,
Exotica.
Peter Greenaway movies or whatever.
Peter Greenaway.
So I just missed it. I never caught up to it, not even on TV. But with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, it just felt exactly like the plot. Like I know what happens in Jurassic Park. I just had not watched the movie. So I watched it with Elon in mind, and it was a very fun conversation. Yeah. But that's an example of the kind of things that I do. I want to spotlight movies that more people should know about, and to
like
talk
Jurassic
about
Park.
films.
No one's ever heard of that. Yeah.
Or Stone Cold Dead.
Yeah.
Or a movie, a big movie like Jurassic Park. But what does it have to say about today?
No,
like
I was just joking. Yeah,
how do you watch it?
That's great.
Yeah, and I talk about music too. So music and politics and cinema.
Awesome.
With sparkling guests.
Well, thank you very much for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is fun.
It's always a sad moment, gentlemen, when that clock strikes that magic hour. We have to send you out into the long and dark and lonely night.
All right. Next time on the show, we're going to be taking a look at some films from a lighter perspective. But don't worry, we'll still be surrounded in Canadians. We've got, John Candy, Rick Moranis, Rick Ducommun. We're going to be looking at some Mel Brooks classics from the 80s. His histories of the world, if you will. And those movies are History of the World Part 1 from 1981 and Spaceballs, a.k.a. Jews in Space, a.k.a. History of the World Part 11 from 1988. That Part 11 thing will make a little sense a little later on, maybe. But in my humble opinion, these are some of Brooks' best, and it should be a lot of fun.
Well, you guys want to watch, go to the movies. We're in the live action business here, gents.
All right, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms of the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We will be back next time.
Ciao.
Oh, you want a Canadian goodbye?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, see you later.
There you go.
I'm going to put that in there.
I want you to move inside. I want you to check his girls out, and I want you to bring him in.
So where's the evidence?
You're looking at it. It starts with the peep shows and the jerk-off parlors. And the pimps move in with the hookers. The junkies move in with the pimps. And first thing you know, we got a sewer instead of a city.